Last week, we showed you how well the Bolero Neo performed in our off-roading review. The entire objective of that review was to showcase the superb off-roading capabilities of the Bolero Neo despite being a 4x2 SUV. We explained in detail how the mechanical locking differential helps the Bolero Neo transform itself from a humble 4x2 SUV into an off-roading hunk. Today, in this drive review of the Bolero Neo, we tell you how it feels driving this SUV in the city and the highways. So, is the Bolero Neo worthy of the badge Bolero? Well, stick till the end of the video and find it out yourself.
So let's start with the suspension setup. When riding in the city, I really had the confidence of gliding over potholes and the incompetence of the government bodies to provide smooth surface roads in our cities. However, going over a rough patch of road like we are right now, you might be able to see that through the camera movements. When you do go over rough patches and potholes, there is no thumping sound from the suspension, which is a good sign of the suspension setup, as it means that the travel of the suspension is pretty good and the dampening is bang on. Now, while speaking about the suspension setup, we do need to address the body roll on this ladder frame chassis, as it does exist. You cannot really separate the body roll from any SUV, no matter how expensive it is, no matter how luxurious or how performance oriented it is, and so is the case with this Bolero Neo, and Mahindras have been quite infamous for it. So yes, the body roll does exist on this ladder frame chassis, but it will not bother you either in the city or on the highways because its levels are contained. So yes, on your drives you can get a little enthusiastic with your driving style, but it is best suited for this vehicle that you drive this SUV with the SUV mannerisms. So yes, some levels of body rolls are acceptable. However, one thing that is not so acceptable is the wobbly ride experience that you get from Mahindra SUVs. And it is not just this specific Bolero Neo, it is even the premium SUVs like the previous generation of the Scorpio and the Thar. With these SUVs, when you are going over even the smallest undulations on the road, they start wobbling around. So it really doesn't scare you at highway speeds, but it does take away that confidence that you get in the monocoque chassis of driving them at high speeds over expressways or highways. So it is best recommended to drive this SUV in a respectable manner at respectable speed, like a ladder frame SUV is supposed to be driven. This specific SUV, according to me, is best suited to be driven around 80 to 100 kilometers an hour because it is just comfortable at that speed. You would not be breaking any speed limits, you would not be getting any challans, you would not be breaking rules, you would be a law-abiding citizen. Most importantly, you would be getting a comfortable ride. So there is a desi jugaad for the wobbly ride experience that we get from Mahindra SUVs, and a simple solution to that is just fill your car with enough passengers to put the weight over the chassis. That just solves the problem. So I guess इसीलिए महिंद्रा ने ये problem कभी solve नहीं की because they know उनकी गाड़ियाँ कभी खाली नहीं चलती हैं. They always have passengers stuffed in it, be it a family car, be it a commercial car. So a good thing is that Mahindra does keep safety in mind, and they are quite getting better at the safety game. Now that we mentioned safety, let's talk about how safe is this SUV. The Bolero Neo is actually architectured on the chassis of Scorpio. That makes the chassis quite stiff, and it gives you the assurance of the safety. And apart from the strong chassis, it does get standard safety features like ABS with EBD. The main thing that Mahindra has given to this Bolero Neo, which is actually a really great feature if they really want to acquire the urban market or the urban consumers. They have given this Bolero ISOFIX mounts at the rear seats for the baby seats. So that is really a good feature that I personally consider to be a game-changing safety feature for this SUV. Now that we're at a traffic signal, it's a great time to talk about the refinement levels of this Bolero Neo. The refinement level is actually on point because there is no major wind noise or tire noise that creeps inside the cabin. The only noise that does creep inside is the weird and lighter sound from this 3-cylinder engine. Weird I say because we're used to the grunt from 2.2 liter diesel engines from Mahindra, the 2.2 liter M-Hawk. This specific 3-cylinder M-Hawk engine has a lighter sound to it and has a lesser grunt. But don't get me wrong, blow your foot to the throttle and it will remind you that this engine too flies with the kettles of hawks, the M-Hawk diesel engines from Mahindra. Now finally, let's talk about the engine and the driving experience that this engine has to offer. I did judge this engine before even driving this, and my reason is because all my life I have driven the 2.2 liter M-Hawk engine on the Scorpio, and I really love that engine. So the number 3, the 3-cylinder engine, that figure was really messing up with my head, and I could just not believe that this engine could really impress me with its power and torque figures, leave alone the off-roading capabilities of this SUV. The 100 horsepower and 260 Newton meters of torque might not seem that big of a number on paper, but when you drive this SUV, you will be amazed to feel the low-end torque that this engine has to offer. This thing is pretty quick in terms of acceleration, but you do need to remember that the gearbox and the power band on this engine is very narrow. What I mean by that is, to get the fastest acceleration on this SUV, you need to shift early higher gears to extract all the horsepower and the torque that this engine has to offer. And the reason behind that is the variable geometry turbo that this engine gets. With the help of VGT turbo, Mahindra has managed to offer you loads of low-end torque from as low as 1700 RPMs, and you can feel it. But a shortcoming of that turbo is that it peaks its torque quite soon, so the power band is pretty narrow. But as soon as you shift to higher gears, the momentum is maintained and you can keep on accelerating and have a good driving experience. In the city, this SUV behaves very nicely because Mahindra had designed this engine keeping drivability in mind. And that's the reason why you have loads of low torque even if you're driving on higher gears in the city. The engine does not bog down no matter what the gear is, and it keeps up the momentum, giving you a good drivability in the city traffic. This engine performs well on the highways too, but a thing to remember here is that this engine is not built for high speed cruising. So once you rev this engine upwards of 3500 RPM, you can feel the lack of performance from this engine, and that is not a thing to complain about because it is just a 100 horsepower 3-cylinder 1.5 liter engine. So considering that figure in mind, the performance on highways are even great. So it's best to stick to the power band and cruise comfortably at a speed of 80, 100 or even 110, but don't go beyond that. Well, I almost forgot to review the steering feedback from this SUV. First and foremost, the steering wheel is borrowed from Mahindra Thar, so it does make you feel good that you do share a good looking steering wheel. It gets audio controls, and more importantly, it even gets cruise control from this SUV, which is a great feature for highway cruising. But coming back to the steering feedback is pretty accurate. It is well balanced. It is not very heavy, it is not very light. I have been driving this SUV in the city traffic, highways for the past 2 days, and I have covered a lot of distance, and I am not tired yet. So that does testifies for the comfort levels of the steering wheel. I had assumed that it would be hard and it would be tiring to drive this car in the city, but it is not. It is really comfortable. Again, I'll show. It can be turned with my little finger. Okay, maybe two. Two would be more comfortable.
We are bringing you a detailed walk-around review of the Bolero Neo by next week. So stay tuned to our channel, and meanwhile, do let us know in the comment section what are your thoughts on the Bolero Neo.